H.G. Wells' classic novel of science fiction and fantasy, The Invisible Man. A reading for you by Ed French. Chapter 20. At the House in Great Portland Street. For a moment Kemp sat in silence, staring at the back of the headless figure at the window. Then he started, struck by a thought, rose, took the Invisible Man's arm, and turned him away from the outlook. "You are tired," he said, "and while I sit, you walk about. Have my chair." He placed himself between Griffin and the nearest window. For a space Griffin sat silent, and then he resumed abruptly. "I had left the Chesilstowe cottage already," he said, "when that happened. It was last December. I had taken a room in London, a large unfurnished room in a big ill-managed lodging house in a slum near Great Portland Street. The room was soon full of the appliances I had bought with his money. The work was going steadily, successfully, drawing near an end. I was like a man emerging from a thicket and suddenly coming on some unmeaning tragedy. I went to bury him. My mind was still on this research, and I did not lift a finger to save his character. I remember the funeral, the cheap hearse, the scant ceremony, the windy, frost-bitten hillside, the old college friend of his who read the service over him, a shabby, black, bent old man with a sniveling cold. I remember walking back to the empty home, through the place that had once been a village and was now patched and tinkered by the jerry-builders into the ugly likeness of a town. Every way the roads ran out at last into the desecrated fields and ended in rubble heaps and rank wet weeds. I remember myself as a gaunt, black figure, going along the slippery, shiny pavement, and the strange sense of detachment I felt from the squalid respectability, the sordid commercialism of the place. I did not feel a bit sorry for my father. He seemed to me to be the victim of his own foolish sentimentality. The current cant required my attendance at his funeral, but it was really not my affair. But going along the high street, my old life came back to me for a space, for I met the girl I had known 10 years since. Our eyes met. Something moved me to turn back and talk to her. She was a very ordinary person. It was all like a dream, that visit to the old places. I did not feel then that I was lonely, that I had come out from the world into a desolate place. I appreciated my loss of sympathy, but I put it down to the general inanity of things. Re-entering my room seemed like the recovery of reality. There were the things I knew and loved. There stood the apparatus, the experiments arranged and waiting. And now there was scarcely a difficulty left, beyond the planning of details. I will tell you, Kemp, sooner or later, all the complicated processes. We need not go into that now. For the most part, saving certain gaps I chose to remember. They are written in cipher, in those books that tramp has hidden. We must hunt him down. We must get those books again. But the essential phase was to place the transparent object whose refractive index was to be lowered between two radiating centers of a sort of ethereal vibration of which I will tell you more fully later. No, not these Röntgen vibrations. I don't know that these others of mine have been described, yet they are obvious enough. I needed 2 little dynamos, and these I worked with a cheap gas engine. My first experiment was with a bit of white wool fabric. It was the strangest thing in the world to see it in the flicker of the flashes soft and white, and then to watch it fade like a wreath of smoke and vanish. I could scarcely believe I had done it. I put my hand into the emptiness, and there was the thing, as solid as ever. I felt it awkwardly and threw it on the floor. I had little trouble finding it again. And then came a curious experience. I heard a meow behind me, and turning, saw a lean white cat, very dirty, on the cistern cover outside the window. A thought came into my head. "Everything ready for you," I said, and went to the window, opened it, and called softly. She came in, purring. The poor beast was starving, and I gave her some milk. All my food was in a cupboard in the corner of the room. After that she went smelling round the room, evidently with the idea of making herself at home. The invisible rag upset her a bit. You should have seen her spit at it. But I made her comfortable on the pillow of my truckle bed. and I gave her butter to get her to wash.
And you processed her?
I processed her. But giving drugs to a cat is no joke, Kemp. And the process failed.
Failed?
In two particulars. There were the claws and the pigment stuff, what is it? At the back of the eye of a cat, you know?
Tapetum?
Yes, the tapetum. It didn't go. After I'd given the stuff to bleach the blood and done certain other things to her, I gave the beast opium and put her and the pillow she was sleeping on the apparatus. And after all the rest had faded and vanished, there remained two little ghosts of her eyes.
Odd.
I can't explain it. She was bandaged and clamped, of course, so I had her safe, but she woke while she was still misty and meowed dismally, and someone came knocking. It was an old woman from downstairs who suspected me of vivisecting. I whipped out some chloroform, applied it, and answered the door. "Did I hear a cat?" she asked. "My cat?" "Not here," said I, very politely. She was a little doubtful and tried to peer past me into the room, strange enough to her, no doubt. Bare walls, uncurtained windows, truckle bed, with the gas engine vibrating and the seethe of the radiant points, and that faint, ghastly stinging of chloroform in the air. She had to be satisfied at last and went away again.
"How long did it take?" asked Kemp.
3 or 4 hours, the cat. The bones and sinews and fat were the last to go, and the tips of the colored hairs, and, as I say, the back part of the eye, tough, iridescent stuff it is, wouldn't go at all. It was night outside long before the business was over, and nothing was to be seen but the dim eyes and claws. I stopped the gas engine, felt for and stroked the beast, which was still insensible, and then, being tired, left it sleeping on the invisible pillow, and went to bed. I found it hard to sleep. I lay awake thinking weak, aimless stuff, going over the experiment over and over again, or dreaming feverishly of things growing misty and vanishing about me until everything, the ground I stood on, vanished. And so I came to that sickly falling nightmare one gets. About 2, the cat began meowing about the room. I tried to hush it by talking to it, and then I decided to turn it out. I remember the shock I had when striking a light. There were just the round eyes, shining green, and nothing round them. I would have given it milk, but I hadn't any. It wouldn't be quiet. It just sat down and meowed at the door. I tried to catch it with an idea of putting it out of the window, but it wouldn't be caught. It vanished. Then it began meowing in different parts of the room. At last I opened the window and made a bustle. I suppose it went out at last. I never saw any more of it. Then, heaven knows why, I fell thinking of my father's funeral again, and the dismal, windy hillside, until the day had come. I found sleeping was hopeless, and, locking my door after me, wandered out into the morning streets.
"You don't mean to say there's an invisible cat at large?" said Kemp.
"If it hasn't been killed,"
said the invisible man.
"Why not?"
"Why not?" said Kemp. "I didn't mean to interrupt."
"It's very probably been killed,"
said the invisible man.
"It was alive 4 days after, I know, and down a grating in Great Titchfield Street, because I saw a crowd round the place, trying to see whence the meowing came."
He was silent for the best part of a minute. Then he resumed abruptly.
"I remember that morning before the change, very vividly. I must have gone up Great Portland Street. I remember the barracks in Albany Street, and the horse soldiers coming out, and at last I found myself sitting in the sunshine and feeling very ill and strange on the summit of Primrose Hill. It was a sunny day in January, one of those sunny, frosty days that came before the snow this year. My weary brain tried to formulate the position, to plot out a plan of action. I was surprised to find, now that my prize was within my grasp, how inconclusive its attainment seemed. As a matter of fact, I was worked out. The intense stress of nearly 4 years' continuous work left me incapable of any strength of feeling. I was apathetic, and I tried in vain to recover the enthusiasm of my first inquiries, the passion of discovery that had enabled me to compass even the downfall of my father's gray hairs. Nothing seemed to matter. I saw pretty clearly that this was a transient mood, due to overwork and want of sleep, and that either by drugs or rest it would be possible to recover my energies. All I could think clearly was that the thing had to be carried through. The fixed idea still ruled me. And soon, for the money I had was almost exhausted.